We have Republicans, women who go to Mar-a-Lago right now, because they're members of Trump's golf club,
Yes.
who are begging him to not deport their immigrant nannies.
This is the
This is the interdependence, and this is America. We have always been this interdependent. You can't one day decide we're going to cut some group of people out, especially the people that are the backbone of caring for our families.
Hello, and welcome to Define American with Jose Antonio Vargas. I'm Jose. If you have a caregiver in your life who you depend on, a home health aide, a nanny for your kids, chances are that person is an immigrant. According to the Economic Policy Institute, nearly 20% of domestic workers in the United States are non-citizens. Domestic workers are more than 2.5 times as likely to be immigrants than the typical worker, according to the Department of Labor. The Trump administration's attack on immigrants is threatening to strain a care system that is already extremely overburdened and underfunded. And this is having a devastating effects on domestic workers and the American citizens who depend on their care. With us today to break down how mass deportations are disrupting the care economy is Ai-jen Poo. She is the president of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, the leading organization that promotes the rights of domestic workers in the United States. A decade ago, she was the recipient of the MacArthur Genius Award and has been a committed advocate for women, domestic workers, and immigrants for more than 30 years. Ai-jen, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm just going to get started right off the bat. Can we make sure that we have an shared understanding of what we mean when we talk about the care economy?
The way we define care economy is all the activity that happens in our society that's related to caring for our families. Children, young children, disabled people, older adults, people who are chronically ill. There is just a whole bunch of economic activity and also just social activity that has to do with ensuring the well-being of loved ones. And that is, so policies related to childcare, related to paid family leave, related to aging and disability care like Medicare, Medicaid, all of that is a part of the care economy and touches the care economy. It's also a place where there's a massive and growing workforce. So there's 6 million direct care workers.
6 million?
6 million direct care workers who care for older adults and disabled people. And that's in homes, but also in assisted living facilities, nursing homes, all kinds of different institutions. And then there's also professional childcare workers who work in all kinds of settings as well. And so we have probably all told, a 9 million person care workforce that is a part of the kind of bedrock of the care economy.
So now, out of that 9 million, how many of them are immigrants? What's the percentage?
Well, we know for sure that for direct care workers who care for the aging and people with disabilities, it is about 32% who are foreign-born, who are not born in this country. And so a huge part of the backbone of the workforce that's the fastest growing workforce in our entire economy, because there's such a huge demand for elder care. We have the baby boomers aging into retirement right now at a rate of 10,000 people per day. And we're all living longer because of changes in healthcare and culture. And so we're about to have a doubling of the population over the age of 85. By the year 2040, the numbers of us who will be 85 and older will double. And that means between now and 2032, the workforce for direct care workers is going to grow by 8.9 million jobs. 8.9 million jobs.
In less than 10 years?
Yes, in less than 10 years. 8.9 million jobs are going to open for direct care workers before 2032 because of the incredible demand, which makes direct care the fastest growing occupation in the entire American workforce.
Wait a second. Okay. Do we understand that? When I say, wait, so the journalists who are covering and trying to make sense, I know, for example, we're talking here in Washington, D.C., you just had kind of a informal gathering of, if you're a journalist and a storyteller trying to understand this, what would you want them to understand?
The fact that they're at home and they've got their aging parent with a dementia that they're caring for, that actually they are not alone, that there are literally 105.6 million family caregivers in this country for older adults or disabled people. And then they are supported by this workforce because they themselves are working.
Yeah.
So it is this massive silent trend that is changing the face of America, changing our workforce, and we're not writing about it because we're all thinking it's just us. We're not telling the story that this is actually a huge part of the American story unfolding.
In all facets of it.
Yes.
Yes, in all facets of it. Now, in this era, in the second Trump era, and it's really hard to kind of, it seems as if every hour there's a breaking news thing that I can't wrap my head around. What does this era mean, this kind of incomprehensible breaking news cycle that we have? How is this manifesting in the care economy, in the workers within the care economy?
You know, what I have been focused on relentlessly is the threats to the existing care programs we have. So right now, with all these people who need care, the cost of childcare, for example, is about $10,000 per year. Meanwhile, the average American worker, 60% of people who work in America earn less than $60,000 per year. So if you have a young child and you need care for that child and they're not old enough to go to school, you're gonna have to figure out how you come up with thousands of dollars that you don't have because you also have to pay for housing, transportation, food, and all your other bills. Okay, now you add on top of that the fact that a whole bunch of us, at least 11 million of us, are in the sandwich generation. So
wait, what is that? The sandwich generation?
The sandwich generation is all of us who are paninied between the pressures of caring for young children and aging parents at the same time, which is a lot of us.
Well, you just described a lot of my cousins.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Like so many of your family members.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's also my generation. And so then the average cost of a private room in a nursing home, $100,000 per year.
Yes.
And so no one can afford care. And we should be creating programs and policies that make care much more affordable, that cap the cost of childcare at $10 per day the way that they have it in Canada. Or in the UK, they have universal long-term care for older people and people with disabilities. Okay, we don't have any of that. What we have is Medicaid.
Yep.
Now, people think that Medicare covers long-term care until they realize they need it, they try to apply for it, and it doesn't at all. And so if you need long-term care and you can't afford to pay $100,000 per year for it, you basically have to spend down your assets to be eligible for Medicaid. So Medicaid is the largest payer of long-term care for older adults and people with disabilities, and it pays for 70% of the home care workforce in terms of their jobs, their wages. It's a jobs program.
70%.
Yes. Okay, so I say all this to say that a budget bill just started moving quickly through Congress that proposes $880 billion with a B dollars in cuts to Medicaid. And then I just saw yesterday that there's a proposal in the White House budget to eliminate the Head Start program, which is a child care program, for low-income people in this country. Working people, mind you. These are people who are doing everything right, working. And by the way, they talk a lot about work requirements for Medicaid. 92% of people who are on Medicaid work. I don't know what we're trying to require. It's all of this bluster to try to take money out of care programs that are already insufficient for the need right now, leaving people just completely on their own with no options.
And as you're describing this, I'm just thinking about the context. Here we are in DC. The amount of ignorance and just lack of information that we are making, the government on our behalf with our tax dollars are making decisions divorced from all the facts that you have just laid out.
Yes, and not only that, but the whole reason why the budget proposal proposes all of this gutting of care is to deliver more tax cuts to the wealthiest and to corporations. They want to make 2017 era tax cuts that ballooned our deficits and right, they want to make those permanent and also expand them. And the only place you can get that kind of money is in Medicaid.
Let's step back a second, because as I was preparing for this interview, I remember your book 10 years ago, which is kind of crazy, The Age of Dignity, right? Preparing for the elder bloom in the changing America. This was the first time I had encountered this phrase. Tell us about your vision about what you call the care grid.
Yes. Well, I just think about, in some ways, just all of the ways that this country has built infrastructure and made miracles happen. Like, just think about broadband, delivering, even something like delivering running water to every home in America, electricity, the internet. Like, the fact that so many systems work here is because we built infrastructure and we invested collectively as a society in these investments that allowed for society and the economy to function better and more efficiently, more effectively, more inclusively. And if you think about like bridges and tunnels, electricity, broadband, this is what enables society and the economy to function. And when I think about, actually Senator Casey said this last year, he said, some people need a bridge or a tunnel to get to work, and other people need childcare. Other people need home care. And care, it occurred to me as I was writing this book, is like the first most essential form of infrastructure or that kind of input that makes everything else possible in our society. If you don't have childcare, you can't go to work. You can't participate in society or in the economy. And so if you have a young child, that is. And same thing goes for family caregivers. And so we need to be able to build the kind of 21st century infrastructure, including offering things like paid family leave, offering good wages for care workers, the way that construction jobs, infrastructure jobs are really well-paid jobs. That's what it should be like for care. And so if we can deliver transportation and running water and utilities to every home in America, we should be able to do that for care. And so the idea of care grid is like, what would it look like to have a set of policies and systems
an infrastructure
and a workforce to support us with the care we need?
So how, that was 10 years ago when this book was written, right? So how close are we to getting to that kind of reality, especially now?
I think that COVID really exploded how we think about this issue, because we were all sort of isolated in our homes, some of us separated from our loved ones who were in lockdown in nursing homes thousands of miles away, or we lost all of our childcare infrastructure overnight, and so we're just there with the kids crawling all over you on Zoom. And I think people realized, wow, I am doing everything I can, and it's not enough. Like before, I think we thought if we can't afford childcare or we're having trouble managing care for our elder loved one, that it was our fault. Like we don't have the right job, or we didn't save enough, or we didn't buy the long-term care insurance we should have bought. And we considered it a personal failure, right? And I think after COVID, we all started to realize there's a bigger issue here. If we're all in the same boat, something bigger needs to be in place to support us. And that created the opportunity to have the conversation about whether we should be investing in care as like a societal priority, not just an individual burden or responsibility. And that was a game changer for the conversation. It allowed us to say, hey, we should be investing in Medicaid. We should be making childcare more affordable so that we can have a strong workforce in place and raise those wages so that we have the workforce we need for the 21st century. And so we actually made a bunch of progress in the American Rescue Plan, and that's where it's such a dangerous risk right now to be gutting these very programs that we should be modernizing and investing in expanding.
And so now, the Trump administration, as you know, has launched a broad and concerted attack on immigrants who make up a massive portion of this care economy,
That's right.
What would it look like in this country if the administration successfully deports millions of undocumented people? How would that impact the care economy?
I just feel like I need to be clear about this in as many places. I want to shout it from the rooftops. There is no way we can care for the numbers of people who need care in this country without immigrants. There is simply no way that the older population in this country is going to be able to receive humane care without immigrants. And right now, we run the risk. There is already a workforce crisis in so many communities around this country. Virtually every rural community, because of the way that those economies have been gutted, young people leave to find work, to survive. So it's just older people. And on a lot of those places, the only care infrastructure they have is immigrants. And so if you talk about first cutting Medicaid and then deporting immigrants, there is going to be nothing. People will die.
Yeah.
And people who work their entire lives building communities, innovating, building America to be what it is today, will not have dignified care. That's what's at stake here. People with disabilities who could be living full lives in the community, going to work, going to school, contributing, won't have the care they need to live.
There was this New York Times report, I think just a few days ago, about a man with severe autism whose caregiver
I saw that story.
Was detained and set to be deported because he tried to steal $200, years ago?
Years ago.
Can you talk about, again, it's going to impact immigrants clearly, right? But also the millions of Americans who rely on that care. Are we getting a sense of what does that look like on the ground when that happens, if that happens?
Yes, the New York Times story is a great example. Here you have a young man with autism, a severe developmental disability, and lived his whole life without ever being able to make a close friend.
Yeah.
And Alex, his caregiver, was the first time he understood what it meant to have a close friend. They went to the gym together.
Yeah.
They did all kinds of things together. And it was like Alex enabled him to live a full life. It's not even an aspiration. It should be a human right.
Yeah. Yes.
And now Alex has been taken away. And so this young man is on his own, wondering where he is. And the parents, who are completely heartbroken, don't know what to do, because this person has played such a unique role in enabling their child's quality of life. And so lives will be completely upended, not just the person with the disability, his entire family, not just the immigrant, their entire family and community. And I think what we're seeing here is the fundamental interdependence between immigrants and non-immigrants. You cannot carve out this population and extricate. It is not extractable. We are not extractable. We are embedded in every family, every community, every corner of this economy, especially in care. There's nowhere you can see it all come together better than in the care economy. The children, the nannies. We have Republicans, women who go to Mar-a-Lago right now, because they're members of Trump's golf club, who are begging him to not deport their immigrant nannies. This is the interdependence, and this is America. We have always been this interdependent. You can't one day decide we're going to cut some group of people out, especially the people that are the backbone of caring for our families.
I mean, you've talked about how important it is to bring domestic workers out of the shadows, right, and into the mainstream workforce so that they can receive benefits, minimum wage, overtime, sick leave. It also means that they would pay taxes and potentially have access to Social Security and Medicare eventually. And I'm saying this to say, now that the IRS has made an agreement with ICE to share the data of people the government suspects of being undocumented, I'm just curious from your end, Ai-jen, how did it feel like hearing this news, that that's happening?
It feels like it's so surreal because what we have is a system where immigrants who are working in this country, contributing every single day to their workplaces, the families they work for, their communities, their own children's futures, which is the future of this country, and they decide they're going to pay taxes even though they cannot benefit from the Social Security, the Medicare, the Medicaid systems that they're paying for. Mm-hmm. They're contributing because that's what it means to them to be contributing to the future of this country. Like, they're not just going to go to work and do all the things, but they're also going to make sure that there's an infrastructure of care and that the social contract that we have with the people of this country for future generations is intact. That is, so they have signed up for that. Yeah. And it contributes between 50 and 60 billion dollars, just undocumented people alone, yes. Not to mention everybody else who contributes, who are immigrants. And that's a huge amount of money. Huge
I thought we were trying to save money.
Exactly.
Wasn't that the goal?
Exactly. And it's a huge amount that's going into our public education system, and so the idea that you would use this intention to contribute and help build this country to try to do a gotcha and terrorize people, it's almost I almost can't comprehend it logically.
Well, I'm curious, what are you hearing? Like, since this news has been spreading, like, what have you been hearing from your chapters and from the members of kind of what this means on the ground?
It means that children leave home in the morning afraid that this might be the last time they see their mother. When they go off to school, it means that things that were just part of everyday life in America, like going to church or going to work, which is where one of our members was basically abducted by ICE the other day, puts you at risk for being forever separated from your family and from the only home you know. And that is terrifying. It's a terrifying way to live, and just so unfair.
I want to pull back a little bit, just, given your work, you began organizing domestic workers about 30 years ago.
Yeah. You want to age me.
Well, Becky, Asian don't reason, right? I don't know. I can never tell. Can you, and the thing that I want to make sure that our viewers and listeners can understand is, how did you get into this work? Like, what led you to this work?
Well, I moved to New York for school, for college, and I wanted to learn more about my community in New York, about the Asian community. So I started volunteering at an organization called the Committee Against Anti-Asian Violence. Yes. And we started to receive cases of Filipinas who had been brought here to the US by a UN diplomats and World Bank employees and international bankers. They got special visas to bring their domestic workers with them when they came to the U.S. on their deployments, and we started to get cases where one Filipina who went to church with one of these women on a special visa would come to us and say, "I think this woman is being virtually enslaved. She's not being paid. She's not being allowed any mobility except for to go to church on Sunday. They have her passport. She's not getting enough food, you know. And so we'd get these stories, and I just started to, together with a group of volunteers, we started to do some listening. We would go to these churches and meet with women. We would go to the parks and the playgrounds where nannies bring the kids to play. If you've ever been
as
to,
they still do,
as they still do every day in Manhattan, Riverside Park, Central Park, and just listen to the stories of these women. And it just was so clear to me that underneath all of the bustling activity of Manhattan and Wall Street and corporate law firms and media companies, there was this quiet army of immigrant women who were caring
of all races and ethnicities.
Of all races and ethnicities, caring for the families of the people who operate the global economy. And their stories were stories of love and care for the kids that they care for, the older people that they're responsible for supporting, and just what they give of themselves, and even at the expense of their own families to do this work. And then what they receive in return is a complete lack of recognition, unpredictability of hours, sometimes non-payment of wages. I heard stories of sexual abuse. I mean, just, it was like the Wild West for them. And I thought, how could it be that the people who are caring for the most precious elements of our lives,
the most precious elements of our lives,
what could be more important than our families and our homes, are actually some of the least valued and recognized workers in our entire economy? Upside down. And so it just became sort of a passion of mine to follow these women and try to understand what it could mean for us to come together and change that upside down reality.
You know, specifically, I mean, we're both Asian Americans. Like, what does this mean for Asian American families? You know, people forget that the Asian American community is actually more immigrant than the Latino community. Like, can you talk a little bit about that in personal ways, about what this means?
Yeah, I mean, the domestic workforce, the number of Tibetan nannies, Nepali nannies, there's a huge contingent of Nepali domestic workers in the Northeast who are a big part of the force behind the New York Domestic Worker Bill of Rights and the New Jersey Bill of Rights. South Asian women and Southeast Asian women from the Philippines and Indonesia were some of the first domestic workers to organize in the 90s.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, to come together. And many of them had worked in Hong Kong before coming to New York. And in Hong Kong, domestic workers are unionized, and they all work under one standard contract. So when they came here to the land of the free and the home of the brave, they assumed that they would have even more rights and protections. And when they realized there was nothing, and in fact domestic workers are excluded from basic labor rights, there was shock. And it was the Asians who said, we need a standard contract here. And that was the origin of the New York Domestic Worker Bill of Rights.
At this moment when we talk about intersectionality, you see that really at work in your organization. Like, you're bringing all of these groups of people, domestic workers, for example. I mean, it's impossible to think of the history of this country, particularly in the South, without African American nannies.
Right.
Right? And like the generation of The Help, that movie The Help.
Sure.
That has been a part of your culture strategy, right? It's The Help. And now you have a mostly immigrant. What does it look like that these immigrant women and generations, you know, or the grandkids, Alicia Garza talks about this very eloquently, like, you see all these women kind of in different backgrounds in action, advocating for something together.
Yes. No, we are a multiracial, multicultural organization of women who care as their professions. And it is incredible. First of all, care is something that touches everyone.
Yeah.
All of us have someone in our lives. I know you have your grandma and your mom. We all have someone in our lives who needs care or will need care. And we are a part of providing it, but then there's all these professionals, and they're mostly women. And increasingly, there's also men. So 36% of family caregivers are men.
Wait, 36%?
Of family
that's
caregivers.
A little surprising to me.
I
Wow.
know,
Huh.
and they're so invisible. And now the workforce, increasing numbers of men are also joining this workforce because there are lots of jobs. But historically, who has built our organization is Caribbean, Latina, and AAPI immigrant women, and African American women, especially in the Southeast.
In the Southeast, yeah.
Together.
And that's what I was getting at. When we were at that, there was some party in Chicago, and I'm looking around going like, I'm not sure I could see this anywhere else.
Yes, it's really intentional work to bring people together, but creating a sense of belonging.
In a language.
And a shared language, a shared vision, a shared set of dreams and aspirations is really easy to find when you bring people who are so focused on caring for each other, for their loved ones, and for their clients. When that's the point of unity, it's actually hugely generative, and it creates the context for a lot of understanding, building, and managing conflict, which is inevitable in any group. Yeah.
Now, you just alluded to this. It's been 15 years, actually, since the New York State's Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights was passed into law.
Yeah.
Which you were instrumental, absolutely instrumental in getting passed. Can you talk about what that bill accomplished and how it has changed the care economy in New York, especially for the immigrant community?
Yes. Well, so a lot of people don't realize that when the labor laws were put into place in our country that gave us the right to minimum wage and overtime, the right to organize and form a union to collectively bargain for our rights, basic rights for workers, they were put into place in the 1930s. And at that time, Congress explicitly excluded domestic workers and farm workers.
Wait, why?
Those two groups only, because they were mostly black workers at the time. And in the Southeast, Southern members of Congress did not want to move those bills forward if they included equal protections for black workers. So it was actually racism. And anti-black racism. And that became embedded in our labor laws in such a way that excluded every ethnicity of domestic workers to follow from equal rights and protections. Irish workers, Polish workers, Latina, Mexican workers, Caribbean women, all excluded for generations because of the imprint of that anti-black racism from the 1930s. Now, enter us in New York in the late 90s, early 2000s, and we are like,
what?
We don't have rights? And so we sought to make New York a model to try to create a set of rights, we called it the Bill of Rights, that would end the exclusion of domestic workers from basic rights and protections that others of us take for granted since the 1930s, and also to put some new protections in place, like paid time off. If you're a domestic worker, it's really hard to negotiate for something as simple as a sick day, because it's really just you and your employer. You don't have other workers who can kind of support you or that you can kind of negotiate together. It's really just you and your employer, and they can let you go for any reason, right? It's at will. So they could like not like your outfit, and you could be out of a job. And so just feeling like you have the ability to negotiate for something as simple as a paid sick day has always been so challenging. And so being able to include in our Bill of Rights 5 paid days off per year was a massive breakthrough.
And, this was 15 years ago, so this was during the Obama era.
This was in 2010 was the first bill. That's right.
So I'm just curious, so that was New York, that was the model. What does that look like now in other states?
Oh, so we have passed bills in 11 states now.
11 states.
11 states, and actually tomorrow, maybe another one.
Yeah. Oh, well, which state is that going to be?
Washington, I hope.
Washington State.
I don't want to jinx it. Yeah.
You talk about a very big immigrant population.
Yeah,
Washington State.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's really exciting. And then there's also been cities that have done groundbreaking.
Are you seeing bipartisan support on this?
You know, in some cases, yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And we have bipartisan care caucuses in a number of states like Michigan, where state legislators come together across party lines to talk about how to improve policies and programs for caregivers and caregiving families. In North Carolina and Georgia, we've been successful in working in very conservative states to raise wages for direct care workers because there's such a huge crisis with the workforce.
Well, but you mentioned a few minutes ago, you know, all the Republicans going to Mar-a-Lago talking about their nannies, right? Like this ought to be a bipartisan
It
issue.
should be. And in fact, it creates a lot of complexity, I think, for the people who are introducing anti-immigrant bills, because I don't know if you remember during SB 1070 when there was the Arizona anti-immigrant legislation and there were these copycat bills in other states.
Alabama was one of them.
Yep. And so was Texas. And the bill in Texas included a carve-out for domestic workers.
Oh, I remember this. I remember this. I thought it was a joke.
The Republican women didn't want their
Let's be explicit more about this. It was like literally a thing where it said, you can arrest undocumented workers, but my nanny. You can't arrest my nanny.
It was literally almost that explicit, yeah.
I thought it was a joke. I remember somebody texting it to me and I'm thinking to myself, wait, what? Is this from The Onion? No, it was from Texas Tribune.
It was real, and it's an acknowledgement that immigrants are so essential to every family.
Yeah.
And that is nonpartisan. So this question of what is happening, the fact that it's gotten so politicized and so weaponized, is hurting so many people.
So, you know, a prominent National Domestic Workers Alliance leader and activist, Jeanette Visguera.
Yes.
I went to Denver when she was taking...
I remember this.
I went to Denver just to meet her when she was taking sanctuary at that church. Yeah. Right? She was arrested, you know, a few weeks ago and detained by ICE.
That was so meaningful that you went to see her, by the way, Jose. Thank you for doing that.
It was wonderful. I remember meeting her kids.
Yes, they're here.
Yeah, they're here.
Yeah.
And you know, what I just remembered was the community that rallied.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, of course, still rallies behind her.
Right.
Right?
Well, it's a kind of reflection of the role she's played in the community.
The role she's played.
She has been such a leader and a beacon and a community builder and a contributor to the strength and the courage in her community that people are going to rally.
I remember that day that I visited, there was a couple of Filipinas who I think they had driven from Boulder or something.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it tells you again the kind of multiracial community that this happened. So when I saw the breaking news that she has gotten arrested and detained by ICE, can you talk about, I can only imagine when that breaking news and when everybody heard how, you know, how your organization, the reaction to this. Can you talk to us about what that's been like?
I mean, it's brutal. It was like a knife to the heart. We were devastated, but also ready for action. And fortunately, her networks are so strong because she's been organizing and contributing and building community for 30 years in this country.
30 years.
And also really helping other people who are scared and afraid. And so it really, I mean, she's been a courage catalyst for 30 years, and all of that courage showed up to support her and her family, and including her children. Her 3 children immediately went into action, and so our whole network and the unions that she has been a part of, and all the community, the churches, I mean, everybody's been organizing. Literally tens of thousands of people have signed petitions for her release and called their members of Congress, and there are electeds and other
the
supporters.
governor, Michael Bennett, Senator Bennett.
Yes.
Everybody has been very vocal
yes.
about, And so can you talk to us about what kind of effect has there been a chilling effect that like, okay, if they can do this to Jeanette, they can, like, what has that been like?
I think that there is a lot of fear, and that fear is contagious. And I think that that was the desired effect,
That's the desire,
right?
that's the intention.
And it's, right, there's the action is in the reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same thing is true on our part. Courage is as contagious as fear. And I think it's our job to hold that line and to be catalysts of courage. And her kids are, they're to me, the symbols of that. They just went to Congress to meet with their entire congressional delegation while here to basically ask, what are you doing to help my mom? And I think it really lit a fire, and we just have to keep going. We cannot cede the story here to fear-mongering.
You have just outlined in this conversation how you cannot separate the caregivers and in this care economy that we have from American society at large.
Yeah.
What is your message to our viewers and our listeners about how they can actually engage? Everybody who needs a caregiver within your family. How can they get involved and get engaged at this moment?
I think, first of all, sharing your story to your congressional delegation to say, I am a caregiver for my mom with dementia, or I need childcare for my young child so that I can go to work in X industry. To tell the story of just how embedded immigrants are and how much we rely every single day on the care of immigrants in our child care systems, in our long-term care systems, for our survival and our own livelihoods. And that story really has not been told as a part of the American story, and it's a huge liability for us because it means not only in the extraction of immigrants through mass deportations are immigrants going to face enormous harm, but entire segments of our economy could collapse.
Impacted. Yes.
Collapse.
So this is where politics is local.
And families collapsed, lives collapsed. Because care is not this nice to have.
It's central.
It's actually essential to human life and existence. And it means when we don't have it, things collapse. Lives, livelihoods, everything that's built on top of it.
So the main message again is this is a time to think that all politics is local, and this is a time for you to make sure that your voice is heard so people understand what this actually means in individual lives, wherever you may be.
And that when you see the reality of how we live in this country, there is no us and them. There is only we. And the place that is the clearest is right inside our own families when it comes to care.
Well, thank you so much for everything you've done and continue to do, and thank you for joining us, Ai-jen.
Thank you.